Okay, so today we begin off with this program. We begin off with this program by Jupiter Academy, and it's one of the the best one of the premier coaching centers of NEET in chemistry. I mean NEET in Chennai, and I take or handle the chemistry section over here. But our academy, it has proven since time and again to be emerging as one of the best in the last 3 or 4 years. And now, what our main purpose in NEET is, what we want to do over here. Now, if you want to know more about this academy, you can actually go to this Telegram app where we'll be loading or uploading daily. We'll be uploading new questions, a new set of questions, and the live discussions that is happening. Videos of that will get uploaded in the YouTube channel that we have. Please subscribe to that channel, and new videos are added to it. There are also certain live classes done, so in that case you can chat live or go live in that and participate actively in it and get your doubts cleared actively. And apart from that, we also have a career counseling session, that is the Gamya session, where we talk about a proper guidance, how a proper guidance is very necessary for the, if we do not get the proper guidance at the correct time, then that becomes a problem in life. So if you want, you can refer to that. And of course, if you like this video, please like. If you find this video interesting, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel also. And do not forget to give this video a like, thumbs up. Okay, now what we aim to do over here today. So today we'll be discussing one such topic in chemistry, which is vast. At first itself, I'll give you a disclaimer that it is a very vast topic. But what is so good about the topic? Why do we need to know about the topic? Is it just because it gives us marks? No. This is one topic. If you know it well, you can solve a lot of other questions, a lot of related questions. Meaning, not just in this if when we go through this particular video, you will be seeing how, using one particular topic or the knowledge of one topic, we will be talking of several other topics. You see, now let us not waste time and let us actually begin. So this first slide, if you see, please don't get nervous. I am not trying to scare anyone. Please understand why I have put this slide first. Now, if you all know, this one particular uh, this one particular formula that we have over here, now the entire basis of chemistry and this one over here, okay, the entire basis of chemistry stands on these two formula. Physical chemistry, if I have to be very precise, the entire journey stands on this, that is molarity and normality, molality, all these things. Now, why are we talking about these? Supposing I go for any chapter. You see, this is the chapter that we have learned first in chemistry. When we come to class 11, this is the first chapter that we learn. When we come from our class 10, we have a little bit knowledge of maths. Okay, what we have to do, we have to harness it and get going with the other things. We have to get going with uh, the basics of chemistry. So for that, what is done is, we come across this particular percentage composition, wherein we learn that whenever we are given certain compounds and we have to find out. Supposing I tell you that I have got this particular sugar solution. Now I tell you I have two sugar solutions. I tell you that this is sweeter than the other one. Now, how this is a very relative term, like it's a very qualitative term. What do I mean by sweeter? How much amount of sweetness is present in one and not present in the other? Now, for all these purposes, what is needed is, we need to quantify it, we need to verify, we need to be specific as to what we need and what, or how much of sugar is present, how much of water is present. So for that, we need to calculate what is the mass percentage. So mass percentage, it's a very simple formula, and what is done is, we just take the mass, we take the mass of the solute, we take the mass. Okay, this is important. Mass of the solution has to be taken. Okay, mass of the solution has to be taken, not the solvent. Now, what do I mean by this? In most of the cases, what they will do is, they'll give you the mass of the solute, they'll give you the mass of the solvent, but sometimes you have to find out the mass of the solution. So whatever it is, you do that particular modification that is needed, and then you proceed. Now, mole fraction. This is one topic we will be coming much and much in this particular lesson, also in other lessons also. So what do I mean by this? You see, I have, supposing I have 2 3 different substances, okay, in a particular mixture. For example, I take a what should I say, I'll take a sugar, salt sugar solution, like that ORS solutions that we have, okay. So that contains some amount of salt, it contains some amount of sugar, and it also contains some amount of water. Now if I see what is the fraction of each of them, okay, the fraction of each of them, whatever it is, that will give me the mole fraction, like how much fraction of salt is present in the entire solution, how much amount of sugar is present in the entire solution. But what is the takeaway from this? The only takeaway, from this particular topic is that, or this particular uh, mole fraction unit is that, if I have got, supposing I have got XA, okay, and the other part is, I have one component which is XA and the other component is XB. So XA refers to the mole fraction of A and XB refers to the mole fraction of B. What I need to know over here is, if I add XA plus XB, I am going to get 1. Why will I get 1? I will get 1 because, you see, at the end of the day, it is nothing but a fraction. At the end of the day, it is nothing but a fraction. Now, we all know from mathematics, in the basic, in a lower classes, we have learned that the sum total of all fraction is always equal to 1. So, supposing you are calculating the mole fraction and you do not get a value of 1, you get something else, then you must understand that you have done some error in your calculation somewhere. Okay, now moving on, how do we calculate? Okay, now molarity. I am sure all of you all know the definition of molarity. Number of it is nothing but the number of moles by the volume of solution in 1 liter. So if I say that I have 3 moles in 1 liter, then I have got 3 molar solution. If I have got, say, 3 moles in 3 liter, then I have to then it just keeps on changing. So the standard definition is for 1 liter. Now it keeps on changing more and more. Now, how do we calculate? Now, so what is important over here is, whenever we are talking of molarity, the first thing that we need is the number of moles. This is the first thing that we need to know. So, how do we calculate the number of moles? The number of moles can be calculated in a lot of ways. Okay, for example, first we'll try to see how the difference happens when we calculate it for an element and for a compound. So when we calculate it for an element, it is mass by atomic mass. Now what do I mean over here? For example, I have say I have sodium. Okay, I have sodium. Now sodium, it is an element, right? It is an element and it has got the atomic weight of sodium is 23. The atomic weight of sodium is 23. So 1 mole of sodium will contain 23 grams of sodium. It's as simple as that. 1 mole is going to contain 23 grams of sodium. But what happens when I have a compound? It is not even just the case of compounds, it is the case of bimolecular or diatomic gases also. For example, if I have O2, okay, I have got O2. Now, O2, as we know, that oxygen, it never exists as O. It is very difficult. It's a wrong concept to say that oxygen exists as O. Oxygen always exists as O2. So, what happens is, since oxygen never exists as O, whenever we talk of the molecular weight, we always have to talk of the molecular weight of oxygen. And the molecular weight of oxygen is always going to be 32, which is O2. It is never going to be 16. Why? Because oxygen does not exist as O. Similar is the case with hydrogen, nitrogen, chlorine, fluorine, all these things you can take them into consideration. So when we talk of such things, okay, is it just the case with oxygen or these diatomic gases? No. Tomorrow, for example, if I have a compound like, say, okay, supposing I have, say, ZNO. Supposing I have ZNO. Okay, the molecular formula of ZNO is this, molecular formula of zinc oxide is ZNO. Now, when I calculate the molecular weight or the molecular weight of this particular compound, whatever I get, now that will give me the weight of 1 mole of ZNO. So, simply speaking, whatever is the weight of the or whatever is the molecular weight of that compound, that is the weight of 1 mole. Whatever be the molecular weight, that is the weight of 1 mole. Now, mass of one molecule, how do we calculate the mass of one molecule? We will calculate the mass of one molecule using this particular formula. Usually it is not much asked, but you can always remember this, that mass of one molecule is nothing but it is equal to molecular mass divided by 6.022 into 10 to the power of 23. So that is the molecular mass. Okay. Now, moving on, if we come to the next part of the this formula session, what we get to know is, what we get to see is the molarity, the other ways of expressing the molarity normality concepts. So what we can say over here is, supposing we have this when the molarity or when the volume is not given to us in liters, then what do? We use this particular formula where you see it is clearly written that B has been expressed in ml. B has been expressed in ml. Now these two are very important terms. These two are very, very important, molarity and normality. If you carefully look at the formula of these two, you see the only difference here is this is molecular weight and this is equivalent weight. Now, what do I mean by equivalent weight? I'm sure all of you all must be knowing by now that equivalent weight is nothing but it is the molecular weight. So, it is molecular weight, I'm sorry for the, please excuse my the writing skills on screen, and divided by valency, molecular weight divided by valency. So, okay, now how do I put this up? For example, I have, say, I have C. Okay, I have to calculate the equivalent weight of Ca2 plus. So whatever is going to be the, okay, or for example, we did sodium in the previous lesson, right? In the previous slide, right? So if I have to calculate the equivalent weight of sodium plus, it is going to be 23 divided by 1. Okay, if I have to calculate, this is for sodium plus, this is for sodium plus. Now if I have to calculate it for, say, say magnesium plus, if I have to calculate it for magnesium plus, so how do we do it? So for magnesium plus, we will, what, magnesium doesn't exist as plus, magnesium exists as 2 plus. So what is important is, we need to first calculate, first know very properly what is the valency that we are considering over here. Now the weight of magnesium we know is, as we all know, is 24. So the equivalent weight is going to be 24 divided by 2. Okay, that is equal to 12. So how will my answer change? You see, when I am going to calculate molarity, I am going to take into account, I am going to take into account this 24 number. But when I am going to calculate normality, I am going to take into account this 12 number. So accordingly, my equivalent weight and my since my equivalent weight and my molecular weight is changing, at the same time what is going to happen is my molarity normality values will also be changing. So I need to be very sure at one point of time, what do I need? I need molarity, or I need normality, or I need to calculate what. I should be very clear about these things. Okay, again the next part that we need to know over here is molality. Again, this is also a very, very, very important topic over here, because molality is the basis of your colligative property chapter. Molality is the basis of your colligative property chapter, and colligative property is a very important chapter because not just a lot of concepts come into place over there, but it is also, one of your class 12 chapters, and as we all know that class 12 chapters do have a higher weightage as far as the NEET question paper is concerned as compared to 11. I'm not saying the 11 chapters are unimportant, no, not at all, but again we must remember that it's obvious. I have learned something recently. So even the examiners know, right? And if you have also gone through the previous year question papers, you will be seeing that the weightage somewhat varies. Doesn't mean I don't learn the 11 chapters. Definitely not. Please don't take me that way. But what I mean to say is the molality concept is very important, and it plays a very important role in a colligative property chapter. Okay. Now, what is the difference here also? If you now compare molality, if you compare molarity and you compare your molality, what do you see? Weight and weight is same. Thousand is same. Molecular weight is same. This is different. This over here is different. This is over here weight, and this was over here volume. So the only difference between molality and molarity is, in case of molarity, you consider the number of moles in a certain volume in liter, and in molality, you consider the same in a certain volume, or in a certain mass of the solvent. You take into consideration the weight in case of molality L, and you take in consideration the volume in terms of molarity. Okay, again, we come back to the same definition, the various ways of writing it. This is mole fraction, where n is the number of moles of one substance or one component, and capital N is the number of moles of the other component. So basically you are doing nothing but you're taking fraction. That's it. You're just taking fraction, nothing more you're doing. Okay. Now percentage weight by weight. For example, I tell you all that I have got 180 grams of sugar in 100 grams of water. Okay. And I tell you to give me the elemental composition. So how are you going to do it? This can be done using this particular formula. Percentage weight by weight means, see, this is a fraction. This is what we need. Over here, if you can see, this is, supposing this is the weight of sugar. Okay. Supposing this is the weight of your sugar. Okay. And over here, this is the weight of your water. So this is the weight of your water. So what is needed is, you're basically taking a fraction. You're not doing anything else. You're just taking a fraction. But since over here you have got this percentage term linked, over here, so you're multiplying it by 100. That's it. Just remember it as a fraction concept only. We have to see when we are learning the formulas also. We can't keep mugging up so many formulas, right? We must categorically, devise ways has to remember how I'm going to remember any particular formula. So this is one thing you can do. You learned mole fraction. You learned how to calculate the percentage mass composition, or the weight by weight ratio, the weight by volume, all the ratios you have learned. So what now you have to do? You have to calculate the percentage. Just multiply it by 100. Simple as that. It's done. Now this ppm, they usually ask you when they ask you about the hardness of water, or yeah, mostly it is asked in that case only, in the hardness of water, when they tell you to calculate the salts present and all these things, then they tell you to do this. Now what over here you have to do is, see, what does ppm mean? Ppm means parts per million. Okay, and if you write down million, you will see it comes out to be 10 to the power of 6. It works out to be 10 to the power of 6, because if you just keep counting ones, tens, hundreds, thousand, 10,000, then comes your and then comes your 100,000 or your million. Okay, so what happens is, or if you go by the you can take it that way. So what happens is, what we need over here is, again, if you start counting, see, when it is 10 to the power of 1, it is 10. When it's 10 to the power of 2, it is hundreds. When it's 10 to the power of 3, it is 1000. When it's 10 to the power of 4, it is 10,000. When it's 10 to the power of 5, it's 100,000. And when it's 10 to the power of 6, it is million. So a million is expressed as 10 to the power of 6. And what is over here? What has been taken over here? The weight of the solute by weight of the solution. That's it. So you've again taken a ratio, nothing more than that. It's just a ratio. Okay, so now moving on to the next, I think the final phase of these formula. You see why I'm doing these formula first is, if we do not have a proper knowledge of these formulas, it becomes very difficult for us to proceed with the further problems. So what is very important over here is, we know all the formulas well. So now over here, what we can see over here is this particular concept, that vapor density, sometimes they give you direct questions on them. What they tell you is, they give you the vapor density and then they tell you to calculate the molecular weight, or actually sometimes from vapor density they tell you to calculate the molarity also. They give you the weight, okay, they give you the weight, they give you the density, and then they tell you to calculate the molarity also. So how are you to proceed? So from the concept of your vapor density, what you will be getting is your molecular weight. So once you have got the molecular weight, then you can calculate the number of moles. If the weight is given to you, you can calculate the number of moles, the molarity, and everything else you can calculate from there. So now after that, equivalent weight, okay, now this is a very, this is the authentic definition, I would say, equivalent weight of a metal. But instead of the weight of hydrogen displaced, you can just take it to be the valency, you can just take it to be that way, okay. However, this is how you should actually remember it, okay. Sometimes they give you questions based on this. Sometimes they tell you that this many volumes of hydrogen has been displaced. So, you are expected to calculate the equivalent weight, or you calculate the normality. In that case, what you will be doing is, the weight will be given to you. The volume of hydrogen displaced will be given to you. Now, this you have to just remember. You have to just remember this factor. Okay. You have to just remember this factor. Now, again, why is this thing taken over here? Because again, uh, it is calculated for H2 and we are talking of for H. So, it's divided by 2. Now, same thing for the equivalent. If the chlorine concept is taken, it is not much taken, but you can always remember it. Then you have to multiply it by 35.5. So, these are certain tricks and terms that you should remember. You can remember the equivalent weight of chlorine is 35.5. So, you multiply it with 35.5. Now, equivalent weight of a metal, if you talk in terms of chlorine, then again it's the same thing, because we are talking of Cl and here we are calculating for Cl2. Now for oxygen, it is going to be this way. It is going to be 8 because the equivalent weight of oxygen is 8, and over here it's 5600. So these converting factors you can remember, but these are not a very, this one, then this one, from here actually. These are not very used. They don't ask you much questions on them. However, if you remember them, it's always very good. Okay. Now, this is one concept that you should always remember whenever you're doing your acid-base titration or any other calculation for that fact. The molarity equation. Now, if you can see, the molarity equation and the normality equation, they have not much difference with each other. They are basically the same. Just that in the molarity, in the molarity equation, you have your moles being asked. They talk of your molarity factor, and here they talk of your normality factor. That's the only difference. There is no other difference. Just that here the comparison is made with moles, and in the other case the comparison is made with normality. Okay, and the next part is your empirical formula. Now this, they usually don't ask much questions on them. However, you can always remember them. It is nothing but your empirical formula. What is empirical formula? Empirical formula is a simplest ratio. For example, I'll actually give you an example. For example, if I have C6, okay, H12O6. Okay, C6H12O6, this is the general formula that we know, and if you can calculate, you will see the molecular weight comes out to be 180. The molecular weight of this comes out to be 180. Now, also what you can see over here is, you can actually divide all of this by 6. If you just, divide it, then 6 by 6 is 1, then this will give you 2, and here it is again 1. So what does it work out to be? It works out to be CH2O. It just works out to be CH2O. Okay. And this formula that I calculated over here, this particular formula that I wrote over here is called my empirical formula. And what does this empirical formula give me? It gives me the simplest ratio or the simplest relationship between the three constituting atoms, carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So basically your molecular formula is nothing but it is a multiple of your empirical formula. It's nothing different, it's just a multiple of your empirical formula. That's it, nothing else. So if you calculate the weight of this, it is going to be 30. It is going to be 30. So this weight, that 30 that we have calculated, this is nothing but the empirical weight. So 180 is my molecular weight, 30 is my empirical weight, and CH2O is the empirical formula and C6H12O6 is the molecular formula. Okay, now so here we come to an end with the entire formula part of it. Now moving on, what are colligative properties? Okay, now what we have to remember is this chapter is actually big, so what we have to do over here is we should try to do it as as crisp as possible, yet covering all the concepts. So what is colligative property? Colligative property is all those properties which depend on the number of particles. Okay, they, many a times when we talk of the properties, we talk because the properties differ because their kind differs. They are all, some elements are acidic, so they behave certainly, some are basic, they behave differently, some are amphoteric, some are reactive, some are less reactive. So we have a lot of parameters. What is colligative property is this kind of a property depends only on the number of particles. Okay, everything else may or may not remain the same. That's not important. What is important is the number of particles are important. And the colligative properties, they usually relate to the physical properties of the solution. The colligative properties usually refer to the physical properties of the solution. Now the colligative properties, again, they are not their chemical identity. Okay, so basically a lot of different kinds of molecules can show similar behavior if their number is the same. Okay, now first for this fact, to understand this concept, what we need to understand is the concept of solvent and electrolyte. What is the difference between a solvent and an electrolyte? A normal solvent and an electrolyte. Now what happens is when we talk of the non-electrolytic solvents or non-electrolytes, what do I mean by them? Anything that is polar. For example, I have HCl in water, or I have any particular solvent which is polar or which can dissociate in aqueous solution or any solution medium. They can dissociate to form ions. Such kind of a solution is called an electrolyte. Okay, so anything that can actually dissociate to give you ions, that is called an electrolyte. And those who do not dissociate, which are not able to form ions in solution, they are your non-electrolytes, or they are your non-polar solvents, or basically they are non-electrolytes. And what we need over the properties, the colligative properties, they are dependent on the fact whether you have an electrolyte or you don't have an electrolyte. Because if you have an electrolyte, the number of particles will change. If you don't have an electrolyte, the number of particles are going to be different. So for that fact, what you need to know is which solvent is an electrolyte, which solvent is not an electrolyte. That is the first important factor. Next is a non-electrolyte. What happens is it does not it is never going to dissociate into ions. So if I take whatever amount I take initially, my electrolyte is going to remain the same even after the reaction is over. And if I have an electrolyte, then the reaction is completely dependent on the efficiency of my electrolyte. If I have a very strong electrolyte, there's going to be complete dissociation. Okay, and it is going to dissociate into the number of constituent particles. So, and if I have a weak electrolyte, then there's going to be partial dissociation. I can calculate the degree of my dissociation, but again, there is going to be dissociation. And non-electrolytes are those which are never going to dissociate. Now, if I have to, talk about the way, or if I have to describe the electrolytes. So now, if you see this particular strong electrolyte, what happens is it is able to conduct the electricity completely. The bulb glows quite high. But in case of weak electrolyte, the bulb does glow, but not so much. And non-electrolyte, the bulb doesn't go. So I think with this example, you have understood how the electrolytes they work. When you have complete dissociation, then there is the conductance is complete. It's a foolproof conductance. But in case of weak electrolyte, there is not 100% conductance, because you have got some undissociated, or you have got some molecular, or partially ionized electrolytic components. So it is not going to give you as much performance as a strong electrolyte will. And the last part is a non-electrolyte, which is not going to give you any performance, or which is not going to give you any conductance. I'm not going to say performance, but it is not going to give you any conductance. Now we come to the first colligative property, that is vapor pressure lowering. Now, what is meant by vapor pressure lowering? Now, this vapor pressure lowering happens only in case of non-volatile, non-electrolytic solutions. Okay, and what does it state? It states that the vapor pressure of a solution containing a non-volatile, non-electrolyte is always lower than the vapor pressure of a pure solvent. So, when I'm talking of pure solvent, I am expecting that the vapor pressure is, supposing I expect the vapor pressure to be X. And in case of a solution containing a non-volatile, non-electrolytic solute, I consider the vapor pressure to be X dashed. Then what we are trying to say over here is, what we are trying to say in this case is that X dashed is going to be less than X. That's what we are trying to tell over here. To explain this, we have Raoult's law. And what does Raoult's law state? Raoult's law states that the vapor pressure of the solvent above the solution is proportional to the mole fraction of the solvent present. So what does it actually mean is, I'll have a diagram which explains it. For now, you can remember that the pressure, okay, the pressure of the solvent is directly proportional to the mole fraction. And second is, what you can say is, the vapor pressure lowering is proportional to the mole fraction of solute present. So what is the difference here? You see, first we are calculating the vapor pressure. Here we are not calculating the lowering, we are just calculating the vapor pressure. We are just calculating the vapor pressure. Okay, that is proportional to the mole fraction of the solvent. And over here we are considering the lowering of vapor pressure, that is proportional to the mole fraction of the solute, directly proportional to the mole fraction of the solute. More the mole fraction of the solute, more is going to be the lowering. Now, why will it be so? You see, please see this particular and try to understand this particular diagram. Now you see, this is your solvent molecules. Okay, this is your solvent molecules. These blue are your solvent molecules. This is for the pure solvent. And over here what you have is, along with the solvent molecules, you have got these non-volatile solute molecules also present. Now, vapor pressure is going to be caused by, these are the molecules that are going to exert you the pressure. So the surface molecules also have a role to play in the vapor pressure. Now over here, the surface is completely covered by your solvent molecules. The surface is completely covered by the solvent molecules. But here you see, much of the surface has been taken up by your solute molecules. Much of the surface has been taken up by your solute molecules. So over here, if supposing over here 100 balls are there, okay, which are exerting pressure. 100 balls of the solvent are present which are exerting the pressure. But over here, as you can see, at least you can say that 30% has been taken up, so, or say 40% has been taken up. So I can say that now over here I have only 60 balls which are exerting the pressure. I have only 60 balls which are exerting the pressure. So here my pressure comes because of this 100 balls, and here my pressure is coming because of only these 60 balls. So now what I can say is, of course it is, we all know that if I have a pressure which is going to be exerted by 100 balls, and I have a pressure which is going to be exerted by 60 balls, the pressure exerted by 100 balls is always going to be much higher than the pressure that is exerted by 60 balls. So I can say that this lowering has happened because of the presence of these particular non-volatile solute molecules. So the more I have these molecules present, Now over here I have considered them to be only 40. Okay, I have considered them to be only 40. If supposing they increase, so the more these non-volatile solute particles are going to increase, the more my pressure will decrease. My vapor pressure will decrease. So that is what we had meant, that the lowering is directly proportional to the mole fraction. The lowering is going to be directly proportional to the mole fraction of the solute. So what happens is, again, if we see over here, to get equilibrium, you have a given number of particles. Okay, you have a given number of particles, and if all of them are in actually motion, right? But here what happens, your equilibrium has been reached with fewer particles. That is why you have a lower pressure. Okay, so this is the concept. Now what happens when we get problems on this? So how do we move about it? For example, I have this problem. So what are the things that I have to remember in this problem? First is, I have to find out, what do I have to find out? I have to find out the vapor pressure lowering. Okay, that is, I have to calculate delta P. What has been given to me? Volume of the solvent, volume of the solute. Okay, volume of the solute. Now this is important. The question never is going to mention to you that this is your solute and this is your solvent. You have to see for this term added to. You have to watch out for this particular term added to. What is added to what? Now 10 ml of glycerol is added to 500 ml of water. So here water is my solvent and glycerol is my solute. At this temperature, the vapor pressure of pure water will be, it has been given to you. What is going to be the vapor pressure of the pure solvent and what is going to be its density. Okay. Then what, and the density of glycerol also has been given to you. So many things has been given. So what do we actually do? First we write down. So this is what? This is the volume of my solute. Okay. This is the volume of my solute. Now this is the volume of my solvent. This is the volume of my solvent. What else is given to you? This is my vapor pressure of pure solvent. This is the vapor pressure of my pure solvent. Okay, and this is the density of water, and the density of the solvent has been solute has been given to you. Okay, this is all that has been given. So how do we proceed it? First, what we can see, the volume of glycerol has been given. Volume of glycerol has been given, which is 10. And what else? Okay, I'll just change the color so that it becomes easier for you all to notice. Okay, so at first, what has been given over here is, this has been given to me. The volume of glycerol has been given to me. And also what I can see has been given to me is the density of glycerol. So if I multiply the volume of glycerol and multiply it by density, I am going to get the mass of glycerol. Okay, I am going to get the mass of glycerol. Now please understand, the idea is to calculate the mole fraction, because we said that the lowering in vapor pressure is proportional to the mole fraction. So this is the first part. Next, what we have to do, we have to multiply it with the mass. So if we do that, we will get the amount of glycerol present. Once we have got the amount of glycerol present, we can calculate the mole fraction of glycerol. Okay. Then if we multiply it with the vapor pressure, we will be getting the vapor pressure lowering. So how do we actually proceed? What do we do? So for example, so over here what we do is, at first this is the volume of glycerol given to us and this is the density given to us. So we first calculate the number of moles of glycerol. Then after that we go on to calculate the same way, the volume of water has been given to us. So and the density of water has been given to us. Now we use it to calculate the number of moles. Okay, we use it to calculate the number of moles. So this is the number of moles of water. Nothing, we have just calculated the mass over here and then divided by the molecular weight. We have just calculated the mass from here. See, volume into density is going to give you a mass and we have divided it by the molecular weight over here. Okay, over here we have divided by the molecular weight. And now we have calculated the mole fraction. So this was the number of moles. So 0.137 divided by 0.137 plus 27.4. This gives me the mole fraction. And we have to calculate, the aim was to calculate delta P. So delta P was, we have already seen, it is equal to the mole fraction into the pressure of the pure solvent. So this is how we arrive at the answer, and this is my final answer. This is the final answer that I get. So what are the steps over here? First step, we have calculated what is the number of moles. What is the number of moles of glycerol? Okay. Next, we have calculated what is the number of moles of water. Next, we have calculated the mole fraction. And last, we have calculated the delta P. So that is how you should proceed with this kind of problems. Then moving on, vapor pressure and Raoult's law. Now, what if I have more than one component? So if I have got more than one component, what happens is the vapor pressure of the solution, it just becomes equal to, see, when I had one component, at that time I multiplied it with the mole fraction of one component. Now I have got multiple components. So what I will be doing, I will be multiplying it with all of these. So if I have, say, XA, if I have XA, XB, XC like that, I am going to multiply each term with I'm just going to add up these terms. So supposing I have but if I have a non-volatile solute dissolved in a liquid, then the vapor pressure is always lower. So this is of the solution, this is the pressure of the solution, and this is equal to the component of the solvent plus the component of the solute. So previous slide what we had learned was either for the was the lowering. Previous slide whatever we learned was the lowering. Now in this slide what we have learned is, if I have more than one component, then what is the effect that it has on my particular, if I have got more than one component, what is the effect that it has on that particular pressure of the solution. Okay, next is, now this diagram is important if we have to know the colligative properties. So what does these diagrams state? In the first part, of this diagram, if I talk of it, so over here I'm going to talk of lot of things. One is my TF, delta TF. Other is my delta TB. Other is my delta P. So I am going to consider a lot of different factors. Now all of these are my colligative property. Now what does delta TB mean? It is a common observation that when we are heating water, okay, or when we want to use water for gargling, or when we boil something, what we do, we add a little salt to the water. Okay, and what we see is, it is you can see at home also, if the water was boiling and you add a large amount of salt to that water, the water is not going to boil off at that particular temperature, but it will take some more time to boil. What does this mean? It means that because I have added that salt to the water, the boiling point of water has increased. Okay. And similarly, if I talk of, say, you're supposing our parents get fish, or their parents get our parents get fish from the market. These fishes are frozen in the, they're kept in the refrigerator. But what happens is, supposing I want to keep them for a longer period of time, in that case, what you will see in many homes, what our mothers do, or what you can also do for that fact, is you can coat those fish with, you can add a little salt to that particular freshly cut and cleaned fish. What will happen is, if that salt is added, then the fish will not freeze easily, because the addition of the salt lowers the boiling point, or lowers the freezing point of water. So this has got two effects. One, it increases the boiling point. Second, it decreases the freezing point. It actually gives you a wider range. The freezing point becomes less than 0. The boiling point becomes more than 100. So basically, you get a wide range. That is an added advantage that you get. Okay. Next is, So if we talk of this boiling point, if we talk of simple terms, what is boiling point? Then boiling point, if we all know, it is going to be defined as a temperature at which the vapor pressure of the liquid becomes equal to the vapor pressure of the atmosphere. So basically, in simple terms, the temperature at which it starts boiling. Now what happens is, this is important, when a non-volatile solute is added. This is very very important. You have to add a non-volatile solute only. The vapor is added to a solvent, the vapor pressure decreases. Okay, the its vapor pressure decreases. So what happens is, the solution reaches the atmospheric pressure at a higher temperature. That is, the boiling point is raised. Okay, the boiling point is raised, and thus the boiling point of the solution is higher than the boiling point of the solvent. Now what happened is, now you see, when I add a particular solute, see what we learned in the previous portion, that we are actually continuing, that when we add a particular solute to a particular solvent, then the vapor pressure gets decreased. The normal vapor pressure gets decreased. So what happens is, the solution now needs a longer time to reach the atmospheric pressure. So how can we measure in that way? So that gets measured as a representative of your temperature. And what happens is, thus the temperature gets higher and higher. So the boiling temperature increases. Okay, that's what happens. The boiling temperature increases. So basically, the boiling point of the solution becomes higher because of the addition of the non-volatile solute to that particular solvent. Again, what else we can see over here is that the elevation of boiling point therefore is defined as the difference. Of course, this is going to be my elevation. Okay, this is my elevation. Here T0 is the boiling point of pure solvent. T0 is the boiling point of the pure solvent, and T is the boiling point of the solution. Okay, so basically the solution will boil off at a higher temperature than your pure solvent. That is what we have to talk over here. Next is about the freezing point. Same thing, if we add a non-volatile solute, then what is going to happen is that the freezing point gets decreased. So that depends entirely on your molality. That depends much on your molality. Okay, and Kf is called your the freezing point depression constant. And now if I give you a particular problem, the same problem can be worked for both raising the elevation portion as well as for the freezing portion. So what do we learn of this is, supposing, first let us see what does the problem state. What does the problem tell you? So the problem first tells you that you have been given 1 kg of ethylene glycol. Okay, we are considering the same thing, 1 kg of ethylene glycol, and this is the amount of water. Okay, you have to find out what are the boiling and the freezing points of the solution. So how do we go about it? Again, first we calculate the mass. Okay, once we calculate the mass and we divide it by the molecular mass, we will get the moles. We will get the number of moles. Then the number of moles, if we divide it by the weight of the solvent, kg over here would mean the weight of solvent. So that would give you your molality. So once your molality is calculated, you can use either this particular formula over here, or you can calculate using this particular formula over here. Okay, the Kf and Kv values would be given to you, of course. Now, so how do we do it? So what we have done over here, we have taken this, we have calculated the number of moles of glycerol that has been given to us, and we found out that this is the number of moles. Now we calculated molality because it was easy. We had to just calculate the we had to just divide the number of moles, and over here the weight of water was only given to us. That to the weight was given in kg. We didn't have to do any conversion. So we got this molality. Now if you all know, this is the symbol of molal. This is the symbol of molal. This is not molar. Okay, we call it molal. Molal. This is molal. So delta TB is going to be Kf. This value Kf Kb is going to be given to you, and this is what you have calculated. Again, for Tf, this value will be provided to you. Kf value will be provided to you, and this is the molality that you have calculated. So this is your Kb value. This will be provided to you. Okay, and this is your Kf value. This will also be provided to you. So once these two have been done, then you can easily calculate the whatever is the temperature at which a solution is going to boil or freeze. Okay, so this is about the concept of your elevation and boiling point and depression and freezing point. What is to summarize, what I can say is, we have talked about three properties over here. We have talked about vapor pressure, we have talked about boiling point, we have talked about freezing point. But these are properties, these are not your colligative properties. What are your colligative properties? The relative lowering of your vapor pressure. Lowering of vapor pressure is a colligative property. The elevation and boiling point is a colligative property. The depression in freezing point is a colligative property. Freezing point is not a colligative property. Depression in freezing point is a colligative property. So these are certain things that you must remember. Sometimes in the MCQs they even ask you this way, that what is it, which of this is a colligative property, and they'll actually give you one of the options will be boiling point, and you will just think that oh yes, we have learned elevation and boiling point, and you will go and mark it. That will give you a wrong mark, because boiling point is not a colligative property. Elevation and boiling point is a colligative property. Please remember that. Okay, next is osmotic pressure. Okay, this is one of the other colligative properties, and what we talk of in this particular osmotic pressure portion is that we have learned it in biology. What is osmosis? Osmosis is the movement of solvent molecules. It is a very unique thing because it is the movement of solvent particles. Okay, it is the movement of solvent particles from there. Okay, now when we talk of this, from a region of lower concentration through a from a region of higher to lower concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. Now, when we say higher to lower concentration, we mean the concentration of the solvent particles only. Concentration of the solvent particles only, not the solute particles. See, in general, when we talk of concentration, we mean how much, what is the weight of the or what is the quantity of the solute, in a given volume of the solvent. Okay, in a given volume of the solvent. But when we're talking of concentration in case of osmotic pressure, we are talking of the concentration of the solvent. So we actually mean how much solvent is present. Here we are going to talk of how much solvent is present. So basically, if I tell it in simple words, that I have osmosis, basically the movement of water molecules or movement of solvent molecules from a more dilute solution to a more concentrated solution. Okay, this dilute to concentrated, if I am talking in terms of the concentration of my solute, if I'm talking of the concentration of my solute, if I'm talking of the concentration of my solvent, then this is the definition that I need to write, that it is a movement of the solvent molecules from their region, from a higher to a lower region of lower concentration of the solvent itself through a semi-permeable membrane. That is why the solvent always flows from a more dilute solution. The solvent always flows from a more dilute solution to a more concentrated one, because in a more dilute solution there is greater number of solvent molecules, so they are rich in solvent molecules, so they start moving to the poorer sections. Okay, That is what is meant by this osmotic pressure. This osmotic pressure is given by this particular formula. Now, what is osmotic pressure? Osmotic pressure is the opposite pressure that we apply to stop this flow. So, if my solvent molecules are moving from say A direction to B direction, or from a more dilute solution to a more concentrated solution, osmotic pressure is going to stop me or stop that particular flow of the solvent. Okay, and it is given using this particular formula. This pi over here represents your osmotic pressure. Always remember, this R is the gas constant and it is always taken as 0.0821 liter atmosphere per mole. And T is your Kelvin temperature. Never write it in your Celsius temperature. We always take T to be in the Kelvin temperature while calculating osmotic pressure. Now, supposing this problem is given to us, so how do we proceed? Okay, so how do we proceed with this problem? Okay, so what has been given to us? Now, for example, we are given that a physician dissolves 21.5 mg of one variety of blood protein over one variety of blood protein to make a 1.5 ml solution at 5 degrees Celsius. Okay, and she measures the atmosphere osmotic pressure to be 3.1 torr, 3.61 torr. What is the molar mass? Now, first thing that we have to do is we know that R was represented in atmosphere terms. Okay, R was given to us in atmosphere terms. So if R has to be given to us in atmosphere terms, we must convert this particular torr, also into atmosphere. So we must convert torr also into atmosphere. And over here, this 5 degrees Celsius should be converted to Kelvin. Okay, and so how do we proceed? So first step, we convert the pressure into atmosphere. Then we use this particular formula. Okay, from this particular formula, we know the value of pi, we know the value of R, we know the value of T, so we get the value of M. Once we have got the value of M, this is the mass. Now what we do is we convert it, this is the moles or the concentration. So now what we do, we convert it to the amount. Okay, we convert it to the amount. Now we multiply it with the we divide it with the mass. We divide it with the mass and then we get the molecular weight. Okay, we have been told to get the molecular weight or the molar mass over here. We have been told to calculate the molar mass. So what we do is we divide it by the mass. We divide it by the given mass. Had we been told to calculate, usually what happens is they tell you to calculate the given mass, which is why I made a mistake here. They usually tell you to calculate the given mass. But here they've asked opposite, they had asked you to calculate the molar mass. So if they tell you to calculate the molar mass, you divide it by the given mass. If they tell you to calculate the given mass, you multiply it with the molar mass. So how do we do it? So what happens is we use this particular formula. So if we use this particular formula, this was, if you multiply it over here, then you're going to get back your original formula. So basically from here, what we have calculated is, this is the moles or the molarity. Now over here, this was the molarity. So now you have found out that this much is present in this many, liter of water, ml of water. So you have calculated the number of moles that are present. You have calculated the number of moles that are present. So from the number of moles that you have calculated, and over here what you did was this much amount of water was given, so you just converted it into grams. Okay, so now molarity or the molar mass, okay, that is going to be whatever weight is given to you divided by the number of moles. This much weight was given to us. Okay, so this was given in mg to us, so we converted into gram, and now to calculate the molecular mass, we divide the weight obtained by the number of moles, and this gives me the answer. Okay, this gives me the answer. So I have actually listed down. You all can, if you all are actually going to the videos, please pause in between and just note down the steps, because those are the general steps that you need to follow while solving most of the questions. Most of the questions that you see will be falling under that particular segment only. So if you can just note down the steps for one, you can actually do it for all the others. Okay, now, so if we just summarize the chapter, summarize whatever we have learned, then these are the colligative properties, and they depend on the number of the solute particles, and they do not depend on the nature of the solute particles. So these are the formulas. So you had the lowering of vapor pressure, which can be written in this manner. Next, you have the elevation of boiling point. See, it's boiling point elevation. So what is this term I? That we will come to it after this. As of now, what we can remember is this is the formula that we have learned. Next is a freezing point depression. So yes, this is that. And next is your osmotic pressure, which is given by this particular formula. Now this I is nothing but your Van 't Hoff factor, and what exactly is your Van 't Hoff factor is what we will be learning in the upcoming slides. So now, colligative properties, as I have always told from the beginning of the class, is that it depends on the number of particles. Van 't Hoff factor tells me actually how many particles are present in the solution. If you all remember, in the beginning of the class itself, I told you all that there are electrolytes which are different from solvents. The simple reason for them is electrolytes undergo dissociation. So if I take the same amount of electrolyte and a non-electrolyte, the net amount or the resultant amount of reactants or the resultant amount of particles that I will be having at the end of the reaction or after dissociation will be greater than that for a non-electrolytes. For example, over here you see NaCl, it acts as Na plus and Cl minus. So net how many particles are there? There are two particles, Na plus and Cl minus. Over here, calcium has got plus 2. Calcium is one particle and it has got plus 2. But chlorine, it is actually, there are two Cl, this is one Cl, and you have another Cl over here. Okay, so the total number of particles over here is 3. So what is my Van 't Hoff factor? Van 't Hoff factor is the actual number of particles present after dissociation divided by the number of units initially. Okay, how many is going to be present finally and how many was present initially. So now what happens is, so with this, what we have come to is, we have actually learned this entire unit. Now apart from this, what you have to do is, you just have to see now, if you get an electrolyte, then what you have to do is, you have to multiply it with the Van 't Hoff factor. And so what you were getting over here is, all this while what we learned over here is, we learned calculating delta TV was equal to Kv into M. But this is valid only if you have non-electrolyte. If you have electrolytes, then you multiply it with I, or I is your Van 't Hoff factor. Similarly for TF, you first calculate what is delta TF and then you multiply it with your I value to get the actual amount, to get the net amount. Similarly for your osmotic pressure, first you calculate whatever is the osmotic pressure, then you multiply it with your I. Okay, so to summarize what I have taught you all so far in solution today was, first we learned what were the basic formulas for the how to calculate molarity, normality, molality, mole fraction, and all the basic terms that are covered in your basic concept of chemistry chapter, which is also very important chapter. Next, what we went to learn was the colligative properties, all the different sorts of colligative properties that we have, and finally we finished up with the Van 't Hoff factor. Now what I'll be doing with you all is, now see, this particular topic that I'll be doing now with you all is, it is not just related to your it comes under the broad category of solutions. It is not colligative property, it is not your concentration term, but it is something that is there are some easy sections, okay, wherein if you just know a little, you can probably solve 2 or 3 more questions. Okay, so what happens is this particular part I'll be talking of this is actually a part of your colloid chapter. Okay, this is actually a part of your colloid chapter. But what happens is now that we did osmotic pressure and all these things, we can actually just understand a little bit. Okay, so this particular table that I have brought to you all today over here I'm going to talk of, see, these are sometimes directly asked. What is an aerosol? Okay, they give you this kind of examples, fog, smoke, all these things, and then they you are told to identify them. Okay, so this is like an additional benefit that you have in this lesson here, that I'm going to talk a little bit about your colloids also. So here we have spoken of the different forms. Of them, the most important form is your aerosol. Okay, it is your aerosol. It is your emulsion, foam, and sol. Okay, these are mostly asked, and they're general. If you just know them, see, for example, if you know in aerosol, the dispersed substance is your liquid and the dispersing medium is your gas, meaning the liquid disperses in the gas. Okay, it's aerosol. So sometimes most of the time we have this concept that the gas or the air is just it's dispersing in the solvent medium, but it's not that, it's the opposite. Next is your foam. The dispersing medium is liquid. The dispersing medium over here is liquid, and it is a gas that gets dispersed in the liquid. So these are very simple examples that if you want, see, the example list is endless. But the most common ones that are asked of you all, that is what we have discussed in this particular portion over here today. Next is, okay, this effect also is generally asked of you all, and that is your Tyndall effect or your light scattering effect. So what happens is, now over here, the see, what happens is the beam of light passes through a solution. Okay, this beam of light, it passes through a solution. Over here, if you can see it on the left over here, there's the solution over here, and the beam of light is passing over here, and it gets scattered and gets brought in by passing through a colloid. Okay, so what happens is, now over here you have got this colloid over here, and this beam gets passed, while passing through this, it disperses. Okay, so this effect is known as your scattering effect. Okay, this is scattering effect, and this is also this you can take up to. So what happens is, over here this light passes through, and then when it reaches your colloid, then it disperses into a greater medium. This is what is given over here. Another thing is light scattering. The simple light scattering, what happens in case of simple light scattering is, the this, for example, is the only entry point of your sunlight. For example, this is the only entry point of your sunlight. In that case, what happens is, the light from here, it falls onto your particular room, and if you we have normally observed it, see, in our if we just stand in the balcony, or we stand in the glass room, I mean a room which has been the windows are covered with glass, what we see is that the light from there, it falls and it gets scattered because of the glass. So that particular thing is nothing but scattering effect, and it is caused because of the scattering of the dust particles, scattering of the other things in air. Okay, next is, okay, so these were hereby we've come to the end of this particular video session, and if you like this particular class, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with your friends, and also do not forget to join our Telegram group for more updates, and for the YouTube channel for more updates. And uh, if you have any doubts or anything, please refer to us, please tell us in the comment section, and let's hope to see you all in the next video. Thank you so much, and I will see you all in the next video. Okay then.